Welcome back to another episode of Franchise Nutrition and Fitness. My name is Ryan.
And I'm Matt.
Yeah, and we are both the owners and operators of Franchise Nutrition and Fitness. You can find us at franchisenutritionandfitness.com. Remember, maximize every bite and every rep. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So, Matt, what are we talking about today?
So we're basically going over what it's going to be different, whether you're a beginner, whether you're intermediate, or whether you're advanced when it comes to both strength training and exercise and nutrition. How's it going to look like if you take 3 days off from your program, or 3 weeks, or 3 months? Or let's say you get out of the game and it's been 3 years since you've been in the gym. How does that look like getting back into it? Because a lot of times people question that. We got the answers today.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point with the 3 thing. The big part in a lot of habit forming scenarios, you'll often hear 21 days to form a habit, which would be 3 weeks, right? But I also think the importance of making sure you can stick to a habit is you don't want to go longer than 3 days without performing that habit, because you're going to have different things. Like if you are trying to follow a new diet regimen or a new workout regimen, if you went longer than 3 days, that might be difficult. So let's say you worked out on Friday and you took Saturday and Sunday off, then on Monday, you really want to get back in there. Because if you start letting it lag and you're trying to be consistent in your workouts, that's going to be harder to get back into the rhythm of things if you wait until Tuesday or Wednesday, because then you can just keep pushing it off. And so if you really want to stick to something, try and keep it within 3 days. So if you take, an example also is a holiday break. So you're taking Christmas Eve and Christmas Day off. Maybe you want to get in there the day after Christmas, or you want to make sure you get a workout in before. So you take off you work out on Festivus.
There you go. Feats of strength literally on Festivus. So it's perfect.
Right. Yeah. And then you can take off the next 3 days, and then you want to get back in. And that's kind of the importance there when it comes to the stretch of 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, even. But if you were, let's go back to the beginning. Let's define where we're talking about. We're talking about beginner, intermediate, and advanced. What are we saying are those 3 things?
So it's really kind of arbitrary when it comes to strength training. Like with many things, you can research, Google it, and go, okay, I've got 5,000 different answers. So tangible metrics with it. Beginners oftentimes are defined as somebody with 0 to 1 year of weightlifting experience. Well, coming from a professional wrestling background like you and I have, sometimes there's guys we consider that are rookies, greenhorns, beginning wrestlers. Some of them have wrestled 5 times a week for a year. Some have wrestled, once every 6 months. So a beginner is not a beginner is not a beginner. Intermediate, often defined as 1 to 2 years of weightlifting experience, and advanced is two or more years of weightlifting experience. But again, meaningful weightlifting experience. There's also kind of the idea that it's based off the big 3: that squat, that deadlift, and the bench press. So beginners oftentimes, of course, have no meaningful trained strength. An intermediate would be somebody who can deadlift twice their body weight, squat 1.5 times their body weight, and bench press, their body weight. And advanced would be deadlifting 2.5 times, squatting 2 times, and benching 1.5 times your body weight. That doesn't take into account different factors like, genetics, all that fun stuff. So oftentimes, easiest way to do it, beginner, somebody who's typically just getting into it, does better with those full body workouts. Intermediate, obviously more advanced, kind of suited more to getting towards our bodybuilding specific splits. And advanced would be more so doing periodization stuff, which we'll get more into. So long story short, it varies.
Yeah, everything varies. It's oddly the whole thing. I dislike this phrase, it's all relative, or everything's relative, because that's very aloof. But you can be relative to yourself. You have to be relative to something. You can't just be relative to everything, because that doesn't make
sense. It's all relative.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. It's a logical fallacy. But the problem there, when we're thinking about with this, we're talking about beginners with nutrition on that side of things. A beginner nutrition person, if you're thinking about that, especially when we're talking about trying to improve your performance, if beginner nutrition is you haven't ever thought about how that impacts your health, like you just eat. And maybe an intermediate is you've done a little bit of research on your own and you have come across some of the other things that annoy me about it's very random numbers applied to your body weight in pounds, which is not accurate. And then it advances, maybe you're a little bit further on, but you are eating for your health overall without dictating that you can or can't have things. Because healthy is your relationship with food and not the food itself. So that's more like the advanced kind of thing. And for example, you are working on getting to a meet, like a powerlifting meet. So kind of what Matt's talking about, you are an advanced lifter now, and you're trying to get towards a powerlifting meet. So you have to meet a certain weight because you're going to have a weigh-in. And at the same time, you still want to eat and eat what you want. You can still have all the things that meet your athletic goals and have a bowl of ice cream, and it's not going to interfere. Right. So that's kind of the bigger thing. A lot of people.
That's the good news. That's
Yeah.
Who doesn't want a little bit of ice cream? And,
Yeah. People, like, when you start restricting foods to try to meet some kind of parameter and you don't realize that you can still have all those things in, that's when you start developing more of an unhealthy relationship. And I realize that there are some people that are elite, absolute performers, like an NFL athlete or a world record power lifter or something like that. But even if you look up those guys, they're like eating half gallons of ice cream, like it's just insane. But that's still part of their program. I remember
good old Dwayne Johnson, right? You're coming from a wrestling background. Gotta love The Rock, and follow him on Instagram if you want to see some fun food.
Oh yeah, those like slices of his French toast are like 2 or 3 inches thick. It's nuts. like the most massive things. It's like half a loaf of brioche to make that. So, but kind of the big difference, like when we're thinking about things and with beginner, intermediate, and advanced, when it comes to those things, if you took off 3 days with it being your nutrition and like you just like I was talking about earlier, if you took off 3 days, that wouldn't be too big of a deal. You're not going to have too big of a variance there. You just want to make sure you get back at it and try to get back to your central habits of whatever your plan is for the goal specific that you have. But if you took off 3 weeks or 3 months, it's going to be a little bit trickier. And especially if you took off 3 years, man, you're back at beginner status. Like you're going to have to start over from scratch and retooling a lot of things. And if you go that big of a stretch, like 3 weeks and 3 months with your nutrition plan for your goals, maybe you need to rethink your goals. You're gonna have to retool something and start over from more of a habit changing perspective, because you're going to have gone so far away from the specific of your goal, that if you really want to get back to achieving that goal, you're going to have to really focus on kind of hunkering down to like, what is your macro split, whether it's more protein or less protein, or more carbs or less carbs, more fat, less fat, that whole kind of thing, to start working towards meeting the performance goal that you have.
Absolutely, kind of establishing that foundation, just like you would with the strength training and the exercise aspect of it, and determining what's fitting into your lifestyle at that point. Like if you were, like you said, an elite athlete, boom, and then all of a sudden you take 3 years off, like you're not going back and you're not putting up the same numbers, you're not doing the same routine you've done in the past. Like what's the longest you've taken off from strength training in the past? Because I know we have very differing backgrounds with that, because very different lifestyles currently.
Yeah, like if you go back and listen to the first episode of season 1 of this podcast, you can see kind of our personal background stories with athletics and a little bit of where all of that has come from. But just a real brief thing, the longest stretches of time that I've had to take off has usually been related to injury of some kind. And when we were wrestling and we were tagging together, The longest time I had to take off, I think, was about 6 months. I know I had to specifically take off 3 months because of a surgery. Like I couldn't literally do nothing. Like it was an elbow surgery, and I wasn't supposed. I could at most drive. I wasn't supposed to do anything that was weight resistance. And then after that, the longest time that I've had to go ends up changing, more so because I had kids. And we moved, and then there was a pandemic. So the pandemic, now we're in like year 2 of it, or now it's endemic. I don't care what anybody says. But the whole thing with that is access to specific weight equipment. So the longest I've gone without using a barbell has been about 3 years at this point in my life, like that. And let me tell you, if you get out of that sync for 3 years, your bar path is no longer advanced. Like I wish I had video of it, but I can't show it because I don't have the video of it at all. But my bar path for a bench press was all over the place, and I could not squat correctly, like to save my life. Like it took me maybe. So you can talk about this in a second, but with getting back to a regular routine, I definitely started off as if I was a beginner.
Absolutely. It makes a ton of sense. You took 3 years off, and like you said, like the bar path wasn't great to put it mildly. So yeah, you wanted to establish that foundation again. And that's really what that's all about. Once you get back in, establish the foundation to get there safely and effectively to meet your goals. And you weren't going to do that if you just jumped right back in. You're like, hey, I don't have the proper squat form, so let's throw 350 on the bar and go to it. Probably not a good idea. Yeah. So the longest I've had off, it's been much less than you. I guess I've been blessed and fortunate that my injuries have been mostly lower body. So I think the longest I took from working out was maybe 2 weeks after I obliterated my ankle and had surgery with that. But again, that was very different. I went to the gym. I was using a lot of machines to be able to sit and work out exclusively upper body. As soon as I was weight bearing on the lower body, I was hobbling around on one crutch, throwing plates so I could bench press. So luckily the bar path was fine for me, upper body, but yeah, trying to get back to squatting, to deadlifting, any sort of lower body movement, probably 4 or 5 months that I would take off from stuff like that for the longest. So yeah, same thing, like not as great of a discrepancy as you, but it's relearning that movement pathway and getting the form down first instead of worrying about throwing weight on that. So yeah, definitely taking time off is a big deal. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners have dealt with injuries. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners like you got a family, you got work commitments. Like you're not in the gym, all the time like you were when we were 20 years old and able to put in the amount of time and work we wanted to.
Yeah. Let me grab a calculator here real fast. So we were talking about the difference in between beginner, intermediate, and advanced for pound totals on your total. So if you ever hear somebody say, what's your total? They're talking about adding up the pound or kilos of your bench press, your squat, and your deadlift, right? So what's the highest total that you've ever had?
I don't know what the highest was, because once I reached 1,000, I was very goal oriented with 1,000, and I didn't really start caring about that until I had so many lower body injuries, had back issues, knee issues. And I was like, okay, if I can do 1,000, I think it was 190 pounds at the time, I was like, I'm happy. And that was with after 2 knee surgeries, after an ankle surgery, after herniated disc, all that stuff. So like, this is good. So I think I was maybe the highest was 1,300, maybe.
Nice. Yeah. My highest just over 1,200. It's like 1,203 or something like that. And I've done that like twice in my life. So 2 times in my life, I have been almost advanced.
Now I'm wondering if I'm full of shit. See, I want to, I got to remember what the singles were.
Yeah. That's the whole thing. Like
I'm so full of shit. I was closer to 1,100. That's
Okay. Yeah. I was like, man, 1,300.
See, and this is what you deal with when you're talking to guys in the gym. Like, oh man, it was 1,300. Like, you're full of shit, dude. No, it's
Yeah. I can tell you my bench was 273, my squat was 495, and my deadlift was 495.
Nice.
Unheard of, but
see, like we talked about in an earlier podcast, your lower body's definitely much better than mine. So that was great because I hit 300 on the bench and I was like, I'm done. I can say I hit 300 on the bench, never have to do that again. Felt like my elbows and shoulders were going to explode. I'm good.
Yeah, literally when I had 495 on the bar for the deadlift, they swapped out the collars to like add the extra 2.5 pounds to make it 500, and I couldn't pull it off the floor.
Oh,
I was like, this sucks. I couldn't even get the bar to bend. I was like, come on, like I literally exhausted.
No, see, you've got to change the story. It's creative license. You've hit 500. Like that's
yeah, right. Yeah, that's the whole thing. In wrestling, people don't realize a lot of this is that when you walk out the curtain, kind of the joke is like you can have two fake things, and one of them has to be true. Like so, you have like your name, your height, and your weight. Out of those three things, two of those things can be fake, but one of them really needs to be true. And I always chose that the true thing was going to be my weight, and it made everybody else angry because that was always their fake thing. So it'd come out like Ryan Michaels, 195 versus this guy over here that's shorter than him and way skinnier than him, who is 230.
Right. Yeah, it's legit like 165.
Yeah, like, yeah, I'm bigger than you, man. You need to accept that. So, yeah, I should have always gone out like 10 pounds heavier, but no, I just was like, no, I'm going to be 195. And they're like, are you sure? I'm like, that's what I weighed this morning. So I'm going to be 195. So, like, I am legitimately also 5'10", so I don't care about any of those things. But my name completely fake, which is different from you. Matt Sells is really Matt Sells.
Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, that's it. I always added like 20 pounds, and so my rule was always add 20 pounds to the weight. But like I've bulked up, which is nice, but I still say the same weight. So it's like, okay, he's clearly bigger, but for some reason he's still only 206 pounds because I was 206 when I was 180, and now I'm 206 when I'm 199. So like,
that's good. I'm legitimately 193. That's what I weighed this morning. If I get really specific, it was 193.1. So I've been hovering around that for a while. But the funny thing is that I'm definitely not as muscular as I used to be. I'm trying to get myself back in the, I would say that I'm in between beginner and intermediate. Like I'm somewhere in the weird phase in there because I took all that time off, but we moved into a house, we put together a garage gym. And so now I'm back to having a barbell. So over the last several months, I've been able to utilize a barbell and it comes back pretty quick. I want to say
muscle memory is a wonderful thing. Yeah. That you trained as an athlete for so long. And now even after having that layoff, you're getting back to it. Your body's relearning how to recruit the proper muscle fibers, have them fire in the correct order. And here you go.
Right. And like your central nervous system, the CNS, is going to get back to being in alignment. But it's really important, in my opinion, to not overdo it in the beginning. I personally had to restrict the weight that I could do.
Absolutely. We're in complete agreement with that. Like anytime I work with a new client, if they're beginner or even intermediate, I always make sure I preface that, hey, the first few times we work together, you're probably going to think, why is he not giving me more? Like what's going on? Like, does he know what he's doing? And the answer is yes, I do. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is that we want to make sure that movement pattern's there. We want to make sure that we're doing it safely and effectively. Because if you go in it too strong, too fast, you're going to get hurt. And then you're not working out again. And now that's counterproductive to your goals. And we're starting all over again when you heal up in 3, 6, 12 months later.
Right. And the same thing with on the nutrition side of things. If you are back, you haven't been really following a program or anything, you just kind of let yourself go. You were previously doing something that's close to elite. Like earlier, that 1,200 total, I was about 3 pounds from being an elite lifter for my weight class. And that's like just that kind of, I wouldn't say elite. And it's everybody relative to me. I know people that are actually on USA powerlifting team. So I am nowhere near those guys. Those guys are elite to me, but maybe what's elite to you is just the strongest guy in your gym, and he's stronger than you are right now, and you think that's elite.
Or
That
maybe elite to you is hitting that 1,000-pound club for yourself, like I wanted to. My only competition was myself.
Yeah, and that, as you get older, you'll soon realize that all of your competition is just against you. And as long as you can be better than you were yesterday, then you're still winning. But the big thing in there when it comes to like the nutrition, like getting yourself back on track, is usually just focusing on the simplest thing. For example, a lot of times when I start working with clients, the one thing that we do is add a piece of fruit. It's like the simplest thing. It sounds like the simplest thing, but it's really hard for some people just to have a piece of fruit every day. It doesn't have to be a different kind of fruit every day. Like you could literally have a banana every single day. And for some people, it's like a hard, torturous kind of thing to make sure that they have a banana every day. But that's kind of the whole thing. It's habit forming, right? We're trying to build you into being better, make you an elite person for your performance. And a lot of times it's those little simple habits that add up for a long period over time. Have you ever read the book Atomic Habits?
I have not.
Yeah, I started reading the book, so I can't speak to it. I haven't read the whole thing. But he does make a good point in the beginning. If you get 1% better every day for a year, you will be 30% better at the end of the year, 37% better. If you get 1% worse every day, you will be close to zero. You will have lost 100% at the end of the year, because it's so much worse to get 1% worse every day than it is just to get a little bit better every day.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, he had like the algorithm that's in there. Like you do the math, it's rate, like number raised to 365. By the way, that's math. We're not talking about math. We're talking about different kind of numbers. We're talking about plates, quarters, dimes, and nickels. That's 45s, 25s, 10s, 5s. And then you can also say change or pennies. Well, people say that's 2.5s, but that, I feel like it gets further down the chain of like you're a gym bro and you've been advanced at some point in time. So you talk about your says, notice there's no nickname for 35s. That's a different perspective for a lot.
Yeah, and they never get racked in the correct place again anyway. Like we can do a whole podcast of my hatred of 35-pound plates at the gym.
Or just re-racking your weights, and like that's part of the workout, putting your weight back. But we were talking about making sure to restrict yourself for your weights to begin, but you can move out. If you've been to an advanced level, you can get out of the beginner phase within a month. Like if you just stick to it. And when I did it, I was only doing 4 days a week. No, I was doing 3 days a week for the first month I did a total body. Like we were saying, like when you're a beginner, you're going to be doing some total body kind of things, total body 3 days a week, just to get myself back on the same bar path. And literally the first week, all I did was the bar.
Yeah, and just building that movement pattern and building the habit, like you said, of it's much more achievable for you to go, I'm going to work out full body 3 days a week, instead of going, well, I'm going to go back and I'm going to, do a 5-day split, and you set yourself up for failure. Like, go ahead, build that foundation for yourself, build an achievable goal. You've rocked it out for 3 days, and boom, you're back to where you were after a month, or not back to where you were, but back on your way after a month to be able to move up to those intermediate lifts and that intermediate workout style. And I'm assuming you focused a lot on compound lifts, compound movements, right? With your 3-day-a-week split.
I did bench press, upright row, shoulder press, squat, and I think I don't want to say I did a deadlift, but I did rack pulls, which is kind of similar to a deadlift, but with just the bar.
Right.
And so like a little bit lower than my knees. But if you don't have like bumper plates or something, like something that
I say, like, you really can't do a minimal weight deadlift if you don't have like 10-pound bumper plates. So
yeah, you need something that, if you had blocks, if you were pulling off of blocks, you might be able to set the height of the block to be close to, like if you have jerk blocks, if you're like in a CrossFit gym or something like that, you'll find jerk blocks there. Or if you're in a powerlifting gym, you'll find jerk blocks there, or Olympic lifting kind of thing. But those usually have heights that's like 6 inches, and the next block is 6 inches, and the next block is whatever. And so it stacks all the way up to where if you could have literally just doing the jerk motion at the top where you're getting ready for that, or the press motion, which is for those of you that have never done a clean and jerk. The shoulder press portion is very similar to the jerk portion of a clean and jerk. But the whole thing with that, you might be able to get to the height of a deadlift with bumper plates on it, with like some like a 10-pound plate on it that you're just doing like the minimal thing. But it's tricky.
So rack pulls were a good substitute for you. You didn't have any of the other apparatus, any other equipment, so you went with what you had. Perfect. Get the movement down, get the movement pattern back down, and get well on your way to getting back to be able to deadlift the appropriate manner.
Yeah, and then for my ego side, I use bands to do triceps and biceps. So.
There you go. Perfect. So
and then, but after you go from that beginner phase, for people that are true beginners, that phase might last a little bit longer than 4 weeks.
And that's the reason I don't like that arbitrary 0 to 1 year of a beginner. Like it depends. Like it depends on so many different factors. Like I said, so many different genetic factors and natural strength and limb length and you name it. So yeah, to get that movement pattern down, to start seeing the results that you want to see and feeling like you're safe and comfortable to bump up to doing a kind of a more traditional split.
Right. And then it's like the intermediate phase maybe expands to a couple more days or even stay 3 days, but you're getting more specific in what it is that you're doing, and it starts getting a little bit more specific to your goals. And that phase can last for a couple of months. You can do a whole program that's going to be 3 or 6 months long. And the same thing goes with nutrition side of things. Moving into like more of an immediate phase is figuring out, do I need to increase my calories for what I'm doing? Do I need to decrease my calories for my goal? And how long is that? So your body is going to physically change a lot more in the beginning phase than in the intermediate phase, but changes are still occurring throughout all 3 phases, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. It's just that the rate of change when it comes to how nutrition affects your body decreases the further you're on that track. Similarly to strength gains, you get a lot of them in the beginning and the intermediate phase, but when you start getting into the advanced phase, you might be happy with just increasing your weight by like 5 pounds. Like it may not go up really any more than that in like a couple of months. But what will help is that you start learning how to better recruit more muscle fibers, which is,
and that's the reason you kind of get that false positive a lot of times as a beginner, where people will be very impressed with themselves that, after just a few weeks of strength training, I went from curling 5 pounds to curling 20 pounds. Look how strong I am. It's not muscle hypertrophy that's causing that. It's basically, like you said, your body becoming better adapted to doing what it's supposed to be doing and properly firing the muscle fibers at the right time in the right recruitment order to be able to do it as your body intended it to.
Right. And along with that, I just want to say, when you start getting to that advanced phase where you're recruiting more muscle fibers, you can start finding better gains with smaller weight. It's that saves your joints and helps you increase your longevity. Like Matt was talking about bicep curls, like they're jumping up. If you get like really heavy bicep curls, you are more likely going to tear your bicep or like a bicep tendon. Like if you get too heavy too consistently, like if you're trying to curl like 70 pounds regularly and you're not on any performance enhancing supplements, you're probably not going to be very helpful to your bicep tendon. I've seen.
I mean, even if you are on PEDs, like those tendons and those ligaments are not
those don't increase,
not growing at the same rate that the muscles are.
Yeah,
so being able stuff just pop off.
Yeah, being able to utilize a lower weight and get the same same example of increase in strength or increase in use.
Focusing on that time under tension. So, being able to utilize lower weights lower, slower rep patterns, slower rep speed to focus on form. You can get very similar results much safer and much more effectively than trying to throw up 70-pound dumbbells with the nice little cheat method of rocking everywhere, which I know we see everybody in the gym all the time wanting to look like a badass with their huge dumbbells. Yeah, which every muscle is doing all the work except for the biceps.
Yeah. Hey man, there's a little bit of benefit and a little bit of cheat, right? So,
absolutely, and that could be a whole other podcast too.
yeah. We'll talk about Eddie Guerrero another time. But either way, so that's kind of the bigger thing. Like we were talking about, beginner, intermediate, advanced. Once you get to through that intermediate phase, you bump over to the advanced phase, you might ride there forever and then go back to intermediate, back to advanced, and back and forth. That all depends on you and what your goals are. So if you for example, I want to have a 1200 total if I get there, but then I suddenly want to run a marathon, I'm back at the beginner. I'm not going to go from lifting.
All about specificity. Yeah.
So I was laughing the other day. I was watching something, and a guy tried to do. He was a power lifter. He's trying to do one of these like random TikTok challenges, and he was like, "I think I pulled something, but it's like literally because it's designed for people that are like way more flexible than he is." And I mean, that's just asking for getting hurt.
Had not been what he dedicated his life and his training routine to. So
hey man, if you want to do stuff that's more flexibility, Franchise Nutrition Fitness can help you out there. But anything else to add to the phases there, beginner, intermediate, advanced?
I think you kind of hit on it, that I always like to say that, fitness and working out's not a finite thing. Like you're not getting to an end result. It's not beating a video game, beating the last level and going, I'm done. So it's very cyclical. Yeah. Like you said, you get to the advanced, boom, rocked out advanced. In your example, rocked out advanced for years and years and years. Life changed for you, went back to intermediate, but you're working your way back up. And it may happen again and again and again, or you may work your way up to that advanced, stay advanced for a long, long time. So it's about what fits into your lifestyle based on your goals, based on the amount of time that you're able to dedicate to those goals, and based on life. So what works for you? What works for you now as a 35-year-old career man is probably not going to work for the same thing as you were as an 18-year-old athlete, and figuring out how to do that and making that part of your lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said earlier, healthy is your relationship with food. That is the advanced nutrition level. I realize it's a big deep and a lot heady, but we can talk about that the next time here on Franchise Nutrition Fitness Podcast. So that was it for today. That's episode 4. And remember, go over to franchisenutritionandfitness.com, maximize every bite and maximize every rep.